Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue with this week's theme of strange music, this time checking out something from the group Rec and Reference. Never heard of this group before. The track we're looking at is called The Cup. I am seeing that this is a fairly recent release, sometime last year. Little preference here, you may have picked up on it from the earlier videos this week. Been a little under the weather. You might have heard it in my voice the past couple of days. I'm still kind of fighting it, but I'm here. We're going to do this. If you see me sweating, that's the fever. That's not the music. All right, let's dive into this, see what's going on with some Rec and Reference. It's interesting to have the harshes in there alongside the spoken word. I don't think that's sung. Holy dissonance, Batman. There will be the death of dreams. There will be another day for you. What I find interesting about this track is how at the core of it, it isn't too odd. Fairly palatable drum beat here. We have spoken word sections, which kind of feel a bit quasi-rap. There is still a rhythmic cadence to it, even though it feels more like speech than rapping. It's something that still feels bound by the temporal phrasings of the rhythmic elements, the phrasings of the I don't know. There's melodic boundaries in this track somewhere. I can't point to them, but I can feel these 4-bar structures on a harmonic level at the very least, and possibly on a melodic level as well, somewhere amidst the noise. But of course, if you listen to just the drums, you're going to find really solid 4-bar measures right here. 4 beat measures, 4-bar phrases. And so this creates these feelings of, building blocks. This 4-bar idea, and we're going to do that again. The textures, the noise, all the other extra things, they they're going to change. They're going to adapt. They're going to alter themselves, alter themselves. But the core idea here, the bass and the drums, the harmonic and rhythmic stuff here, this is static. This doesn't really change much. This is a consistency. And through that, I can also find the vocal delivery abides by those invisible walls as well. They slot into temporal ideas. They're not rapped, but it's not full spoken word either. For instance, if you just take a vocal sample from a film or a radio show or a speech or something and overlay it on music, yeah, ultimately, after, 64 bars or whatever, everything kind of lines up and there's a clean stopping point for everything. But on the whole, the phrases of the sentences themselves aren't really going to slot too well against the musical cadence, unless you build the music around that sample. This doesn't feel like that. This feels like it's rhythmically in conversation with the music, which is what rap does. But this doesn't feel rapped. I don't know if I can go further into that. It's just a really interesting blurring of the lines between spoken word and rapped vocals, and I don't really know how to interpret it because I don't know that I've heard it before. Usually it's pretty clear which style of vocal delivery we're looking at. So I find that to be a really interesting component of this. As I was sort of mentioning all in there, we do have a strong foundation to this. The drums and the harmonic work, I called it the bass earlier. It is usually a lower end tone that is giving us this harmonic function. We have this chord progression, and it just makes sense. There is movement to it. It feels semi-natural. Now, we're going to talk about the larger scope of harmony in a second, but when you focus on just this one core instrument at the bottom of this entire track, it and the drums give us something that's fairly standard. If you follow these instruments and the vocals, the track really isn't that odd, for the most part. It almost provides a framework for me to understand the more esoteric and novel choices in here because it structures them against this framework of normalness, of standard composition. I like that. We've listened to some wild stuff this week that I don't have any framework of understanding for at all. I'm going in trying to invent new language to talk about this stuff. Here, though, we have a track that, at least a portion of it, the foundation, probably the most integral part of a composition, is kind of textbook. The drums aren't doing any bonkers things. It's keeping the backbeat, pretty solid groove throughout. And we have chord progression, and the chord progression is standard-ish. It's certainly a bit oddball at times in where it chooses to go, but for the most part, it feels like a rock track, maybe even a pop rock track at times. There's something comforting in this idea. This familiarity in the normal that allows me to explore the stranger concepts. This might be a good bridge track into more I don't really want to use the word strange because I don't feel like this song is too strange, but it is very unique. A good bridge track into more unique ideas, maybe possibly avant-garde or experimental. I'm not entirely sure about those titles for this. Regardless, though, having the familiar mixed with the unfamiliar is usually a really great way to get someone's foot in the door of stuff that they're less familiar with. For me, I'm usually pretty resistant towards noise in general. And this is a very noisy track. But having this foundation helps. There's something for me to hold on to while I'm being thrown around in this tornado. And there is a lot of tornado here. There's a lot of noise going on right from the start. We have layers of competing harmonic ideas. This is only expanded and extrapolated on as we get further into the track. I said we were going to talk about the harmony of this track. Here's where we're going to do it. It is bonkers. And what I find most interesting too is that we do have a more standard chord progression from a solo instrument at the bottom of all this. It's just that what's built on top of it seems to ignore that instrument entirely. They're all doing their own things harmonically. The note choices both individually at any specific beat in this track, but also when we do hear what sounds to be purposeful chords, sometimes from a single instrument that can play multiple notes, or from a collection of monotone instruments that can, or monophonic instruments that can only play one pitch at a time. It doesn't matter. We have these collections of notes and they are just tense. There is almost a competing space for harmony here, which is interesting. We've certainly heard tracks that feel like there's too much rhythmic information going on, where maybe the drums are polyrhythmic against the bass, is polyrhythmic against the guitar, is polyrhythmic against the vocals, and you just don't really know how to groove to it. You don't know how to bob your head. You don't know how to move your hips. Like, it's a smorgasbord of rhythmic ideas. This is the harmonic function of that. And through this, I don't know, scatter shot of chords and chordal information and note intervals, we have, well, honestly, a rather frictional palette of harmony. There's just a lot of note combinations in here that the sound waves don't gel well together. They clash, they create friction, they're just in opposition to each other, and it creates levels of dissonance. And this track really delves into that. Some of these sections are mildly dissonant, something I can handle, not a sound I would typically choose to explore, but is fine as a little flavor for this moment. To the most dissonant sounds, usually, well, I say usually, there is one specific chord, primarily from a stack of vocals around the 1 minute 45-second mark. I remember making a pretty gnarly face about it. It really struck me as a bizarre sound. I'm going to wager to say it was microtonal, which gives us all new levels of dissonance to hear. Very fresh sounds in that regard, but incredibly different, and something that is an acquired taste. You really got to build your ear to hear those sounds. And we get everything in between, from the mildly dissonant to the heavily dissonant. There's even some parts in here that feel very consonant. I will say they are quite rarely used. Only 2 or 3 sections I can think of off the top of my head. And when I say a section, I mean like a single chord within a bar, not even a full bar's worth of chordal information. It is a harmonically dense, but also harmonically mature track. I think it's easy to write this off as noise, but there is a lot of, I'm going to say, chord theory present here, whether it's intentional academic chord theory or just going by the gut. Yeah, that sounds good. Let's throw it in there. Just play some other notes. Yeah, that sounds great. Throw that in there too. You know, just kind of sussing out how the song is going to evolve. Something that works more on an ear level versus a brain level, having that academic knowledge of knowing these notes versus finding those notes. And through that lens, I think this is a really great track to explore if you want to expand your sonic palette, both in composition and as a listener. If you feel like your music is getting harmonically boring, study the chords that these guys are throwing into this track. I think you're going to find some interesting stuff there, even if not all of it is something that's going to stick with you or something that you would want to incorporate into your own writing. But beyond the harmony, there is still just a lot of oddity in here, and I'm pretty sure this will be the last section for this analysis. There's a lot of sounds, electronic sounds, there's buzzing, there's humming, there's beeping, there's synth pads. There's just so many different tones, and I'm not going to say that all of them are cohesive. It ends up feeling a bit more like sonic collage, where some of these timbres and textures feel like they belong to different atmospheres. maybe even different styles of music, and smashing them all together is like smashing paint and scrapbooking and clay and pointillism and crayon all into one picture. The picture itself might be really well composed, but it's made of all these different mediums and it feels disconnected because of that. That's what this music ends up sounding like to me. Compositionally solid, the production execution is wildly disjointed. So many crazy ideas tossed in here together, and it's almost as if the song itself doesn't care, doesn't even recognize that there's so many disparate concepts sonically and texturally in this track. And I think the one that stands out the most to me kind of came in about the halfway mark, where that spoken word stuff that we saw at the beginning of the rapped sing-songy, actually. Is it? I don't know, man. I've used the term sing-songy before to kind of be a space between spoken word and sung. That doesn't feel right for the space between spoken word and rap. Anyways, we had those vocals. They were cleanly delivered, though. Maybe a little bit of grit at times, putting a little bit of extra bite on a specific syllable, but generally clean vocals, no compression on them. We had harsh vocals layered on top of that, and at one point, even 3 or 4 kinds of vocals all layered up. The sheer concept of spoken word and raspy, false chord-esque related sound, lots of compression on the low end there. Those two are just generally not heard together, which in and of itself is kind of wild, but within this context, it's even wilder because harsh vocals and avant-garde hip-hop is maybe where I would put this. Something close to the electronic side of things, but there's still a hip-hop influence somewhere in there. Harsh vocals are just not something you hear too often in either of these genres. So I find that to be really interesting. Oftentimes they're accompanied by distorted guitars, metal, you know, big drums, big guitars, growling vocals. That's kind of like the timbres that fit together. Growling doesn't really sound like it fits in anything in here, and part of that is that we don't have these big guitars to really accompany that sound. There's just a lot of eclectic sonic choices here. In some ways, it feels amateurish, as if you don't quite have an ear for the sound that you want. You're just kind of throwing a bunch of stuff together that, you know, not even for a reason. Just like grabbing some sound packs, a virtual instrument library. And, oh, what's this sound? Oh, that's kind of cool. If I put it through this effect, kind of get this sound. Oh, toss it in there. And scroll down the list. Oh, what's that? Oh, that sounds pretty cool. And like, there's no purpose for it. It's sort of just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. And in this case, everything stuck, but maybe not for the right reasons. But I don't want to write this off as amateurish. While I can certainly see an amateur doing something like this. In fact, when I started dabbling with electronic instrumentation in my past, I kind of did the same thing. I didn't know what I was in store for. I just knew that I had a huge library of instruments to play with and a lot of effects pedals. So let's see what happens. And I can feel that sort of raw exploration, just an untapped curiosity, sonic curiosity. But I don't want to write them off as amateur. I like to give the benefit of the doubt to every artist. I don't always do that. I kind of make that mistake sometimes. Flawed person. It's just humanity, right? We all make mistakes. But I try my best to always give the benefit of the doubt. And here I want to assume that every choice in here was purposeful, that this is a sonic palette, a sonic profile that they handcrafted and engineered to create this specific smorgasbord of ideas. This sonic collage was intentional. If so, what does it mean? Fortunately, I don't know. I don't quite have a read on all of that. It is an interesting sound to me, quite novel. But because of the novelty, I don't have a strong element of understanding with it. because it breaks the rules so often, it's kind of speaking its own language at times. I can kind of catch glimpses in some of it, but my interpretations are also based off of my definitions of those words, those sounds, and that might not be the definitions they're using. Parts of this track come across as antagonistic and even outright harmful. That chord, that was not a polite chord to my ears, but maybe to theirs, this is a song of beauty, of joy. They're just using different definitions for their words. Let's hit some lyrics on this. We'll see what's going on there. And just as the music gives me vibes without any direct explanation for what I'm feeling, kind of putting me in a place outside of my own vocabulary, the lyrics are doing the same thing. I get a feeling of disgust at whatever they're talking about. There is a feeling of struggle, needing to do more just to make the baseline thing happen, where the effort and results is not in balance. But I can't point to any specific part and say, well, this is the phrase that makes me think that. It's kind of wild, all of this. It starts with, on this train is a body I can't read. Superstition, the blood is staring from the eyes and the mass is sinking. There will be no. And then he gets cut off abruptly and just says, in the feeling. We don't know what won't be in the feeling, but it won't be there. Maybe the absence is an inclusion of everything. There will be nothing in the feeling. I don't know. Says the cup is being drained and filled, and I dreaded. Every art is tired, and every head is leaded. The every art is tired, I think I can make sense to the music and exploration outside the bounds of the traditional. Maybe they found that what they were making, or what everyone else is making musically, is boring, tired, tropey, cliched, iterative. Even when they look at innovative works, it still feels based too much on iterative writing, a refining of progressiveness. They decided to go completely outside the bounds here. Maybe. That's one line I'm pulling a feeling from. The rest of this track doesn't really sell me on that vibe either. It says the figures of a figure, I'm thinking the dancing coins will automate me. A darkness type of feeling while the body's up on feelings. I don't know, dude. They continue to go on with these seemingly profound 2-line ideas tucked into 4 to 8-line stanzas, little snippets of genius that aren't tied or threaded to anything else. It's as if you need to be on a higher level mentally to grasp what they're getting at, or maybe they're just, once again, trying not to be tired and cliche. I don't know. There's certainly a feeling of wanting more, to do more. I don't know. I'm going to pass the mic over then. What did you think of this track? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this? Let me know. Add all of that as well as anything else that you'd like to into the comment section below. Above that in the description box is a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could like, subscribe, and ring the bell, I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.